start at 10% and increase it 1% for every 50 billion thereafter. You don't determine the size of the bank. The cost of the capital does. The market will regulate the size of the bank and not some arbitrary politically derived size figure in some regulator's mind. The market is so much quicker and more skilled than the bureaucrats. Let it work. 3, too big to fail must be expressly made illegal in terms of government action in various TARP initiatives, ensuring the health of well-placed Wall Street banks must be eliminated as soon as possible. The longer the rate is subsidized and liquidity availability is guaranteed, the more difficult it will be to restore a market for banking, and the more corrupt government's relations with the Wall Street banks become. We have not healed from the last financial crisis, and if anything, we have a double standard for bank performance and return, with the big boys enjoying enormous and unfair regulatory and marketing advantage. Listen to me now. This kind of government regulation and finance will inevitably lead to scandal and a financial crash. No more bailouts because of the consequences of moral hazard. Number 4, the regulatory framework must be completely overdone. I won't bore you with the details of that, but the regulators are too slow, too late, and are owned by the large banks. Number 5, the Fed must have a thorough and public audit. We're on a monetary expansion unlike anything I've ever seen. Do you know that our Fed bought 64% of all U.S. federal bonds the last 3 years? The market didn't buy them. The Fed printed the money and bought them. We have the left hand feeding the right hand. And interest rates are at a historic low, deliberately subsidized and depressed by the Fed. This is unsustainable. It's time to know what the Fed's balance sheet really says. I do a public audit. Number 6, the Fed's board must be clean of all members with a conflict of interest with the large banks who directly benefit from Fed policy. It is disgraceful and corrupt. 70% of the members of the Federal Reserve come from one of the large Wall Street banks. Is that clean? Is that fair? Number 7, the Fed cannot serve two masters. We ought to eliminate the Humphrey bill, which required the Fed to look at employment and the value of the currency. It ought to be concerned with the value of the currency. It ought to be concerned with monetary policy. Government ought to be held accountable for fiscal policy to grow jobs. Number 8, and finally, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac should be eliminated and are decoupled from federal financing and guarantees. They've cost we taxpayers $183 billion so far in taxpayer money. Gone! They gave loans to 3 million people who didn't make the first month repayment. They caused the housing boom and bust. They brought an industry and a nation to its knees. They flooded the D.C. landscape with millions in bribes, contributions, and jobs, a la Barney Frank. His lover had a job at Fannie Mae, including the chairman of the banking committee, and the candidates for president from both parties were the largest recipients of Fannie and Freddie lobbyist money. That's Barack Obama and John McCain. Top of the list. Romney has his hand in the till, doing business with Fannie and Freddie. He had to admit it in a debate, as does Gingrich. Obama promised their elimination when he ran 4 years ago. 4 years later, they're still growing, still losing taxpayer money, still the poster child for corruption and dirty laundry, still the lead example of the good old boy network prevalent in the corrupt political practice. These 8 banking actions will clean the banking system and hasten the process of healing and rebuilding. It will strengthen the dollar, lower the cost of gasoline, lessen the threat of inflation, increase competition and choice in banking, focus the attention of regulators on capital, asset quality, and liquidity, reduce energy speculation, and depoliticize the Fed. Investment banking will disconnect from commercial banking and lessen taxpayer risk. Wall Street will grow as a source of capital and change, but it will lose its hyper-risky center of the universe role. And the era of the bailouts and the super banks will be over. Banking will go back to value and rebuilding a great nation. These things are not possible without campaign reform. I took that detail to show you what needs to be done. What 68 years on this earth and 50 of it in banking knows to be the truth. But it will not get done unless you clean up the campaign giving first. President Obama has spent more time fundraising than any president in American history, including Franklin Roosevelt, who served far longer. He's all about raising $1 billion. And who is going to give him this money? Special interests, lobbyists, big corporations, Wall Street banks, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, bundlers, those who need access, power brokers, influence peddlers, crony capitalists, tort lawyers, labor unions, big oil, the military-industrial complex, the companies which depend on government agencies, and the newly minted super PACs. Washington will not and cannot do bank reform, tax reform, budget reform, trade reform, without stopping the influence buying system of government we have become. This campaign is about jobs, but everybody talks about a new program. We don't need a new program. We need to clean up Washington. That's the program. The program is a broom, not spending more taxpayer money. Watch me. Remember when we used to have a representative government? Right now our government is rented and bought. And both parties are in the deal. You can't start a third party. We're trying. Neither party will let you talk reform. I was the only candidate for president elected to both Congress and as governor. Do you know that? Only man running. And was not asked to participate in a single nationally televised Republican debate. And I've been a Republican for 20 years, and I'm the only governor that changed parties while in office to become a Republican and started a two-party state. In my state, we were one party. Had 144 members of the legislature, and 138 were Democrats. That's one of the reasons Louisiana was corrupt. You need two parties and more. All I did was start the second. I was 0 for 23 in the nationally televised debates. Most people in America don't even know I'm running. It's a rigged deal. They planned it like that. 87% of this Congress and of every Congress now will be reelected. It's a rigged deal. The parties control reapportionment. Both reject term limits, and neither talk reform. All they talk is victory. It is a continuous election cycle with no issues discussed. Have you heard anybody running for president name the 8 points that I named on banking, which is just one of 15 issues? No! They don't have the guts to do it. And they can't do it. They're bought. We are a nation in trouble. We have excessive debt, and there's no end in sight. The Obama budget, by a law I passed in 1983, he has to have a 10-year budget. You ought to look at it. Deficits all 10 years, and in the 10th year, it's $700 billion. The deficit has gone up $5 trillion in his 3.5 years. And in the next 10 years, he has it going from $15 trillion to $29.7 trillion. We're a nation in trouble. Now listen to this. Our annual deficit is bigger than all government operations combined except interest and entitlements. You can eliminate the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Marine Corps, all military bases overseas and domestic, and all government agencies, all of them, and still not balance the budget. Hello?